Good evening, everyone. The NAACP, we welcome you to this economic annual summit that we host each and every year. Today, we'll be having a discussion and dialogue relevant to economics and getting some solutions and having dialogue relevant to things that address communities of color concerning financial education and entrepreneurship and many other things that we'll have discussion over the next couple days in our summit. With that being said, what I'll be doing right now is just somewhat going over etiquette. We are aware there is Zoom bombing that goes on with our panel discussions, and we will address those issues if they do come up. Also, please ask questions in the Q&A. We are also Facebook Live today as well. If you have any questions on Facebook Live, you will be able to ask questions and then respond to those questions. With that being said, we also thank you for our participants and also our panelists on this evening. And I'm going to turn everything over now then to Elizabeth Guthridge. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, President Watson. I appreciate the introduction this morning. And I want to thank my panelists for taking time with us today for this very, very important discussion. So welcome to our 2020 NAACP Financial Summit. As you know, because of the economic, the pandemic, we are now moving to the Zoom platform. So ordinarily, we would have a full 2-day summit. So today, we are going to talk about the closing of the racial gap. So thank you for joining us for the viewing and discussion of a documentary called Explain, Closing of the Racial Wealth Gap. Senator Cory Booker and others discuss how slavery, housing discrimination, and centuries of inequities have compounded to create a racial wealth gap. After this short film, we're going to have our moderator, Tracee Knight Carter. She is going to moderate a panel, and we're going to talk about this racial gap. So right now, what I'm going to do is introduce her, and after the film, the next voice you will hear is Tracee Knight Carter. Tracee Knight Carter is a licensed professional real estate agent currently residing in the Harrisburg Camp Hill area. She's been a resident of Central PA for 23 years. She's attended Clarion University of Pennsylvania, where she's earned her degree in business administration with a concentration in finance. Tracee is an agent with the Coldwell Banker Residential Brokerage. She has held several managerial positions in the public sector, including auditor, underwriter, and various supervisory and oversight roles prior to launching her career in real estate. She is a committed professional, and she enjoys volunteering her time in community. She's an active member of the local association, Greater Harrisburg Association of Realtors. She sits on several committees, and she served on the board of directors of the Harrisburg Area Association. She's currently the president of the local chapter of the National Association of Realtor Estate Brokers, Central PA Association of Realists. So the next person you will hear is our moderator. So just give me a moment and I will launch the video, and then we will have a discussion.
Okay, all righty. Well, certainly I want to thank the NAACP for inviting me to participate in their economic summit and to introduce two people that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. I've been working with them for the last 10 years or so, and they have really been guiding my real estate career. So everything you said about me is because of them, but I'll still pay you later.
Okay. Excellent. Okay.
So the first person, and one of the speakers is having a hard time logging on, but he'll be with us shortly.
Okay.
So the first person is a young lady. She's out of the Philadelphia area, and she is like a wisdom of knowledge. She has her own brokerage. She's been involved in housing, and she's spoken in front of, I don't know, just, she has articles all over the city and the state. This lady is certainly a leader in politics and a leader in networking and in real estate in the Philadelphia area. So without further ado, I want to make sure I invite Arlene Wayne Thomas to our as one of our panelists. Okay, so and our next panelist, when he comes on, I'll introduce him. My first question, well, my first thought when I saw that video a couple of weeks ago was, wow. And I said it again when it ended. And the one thing, there were two catchy phrases, but one that was really, really struck my attention was African Americans for 246 years, we were wealth. For another 100 years, the government prevented us from doing anything. So we are starting 300 years behind the line trying to catch up. And we wonder why, you know, there is this economic wealth gap, but there is, and nothing is created equal. And we're still in it, in this race trying to make it equal. And so the speakers I've asked to be involved are involved in real estate, of course. And I believe that real estate is a cornerstone of wealth. They even talk about in 1860, how the one gentleman, I can't remember the president's name, wanted to grant land to African Americans. And so, so without further ado, Miss Arlene, my first question to you, and I know you've been around longer than I have. My first question to you is, when you look at that video, what is one experience that you can remember as a young lady, as a young woman, or as a kid regarding some, just like Cory Booker explained when his father purchased a home? Do you have an experience like that?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, Tracee. You have been an awesome person, and I know your passion for equality as well as my passion. We've been struggling with this for quite some time. But to answer your question, the video was awesome. It really tells the story, you know, from slavery up to today. I think that what occurred to me, I haven't had an experience like Cory Booker. That was just, you know, awesome, awesome. They took the risk. And that is the problem with the industry now, is that there is a platform or narrative for risk-based lending that we know of now, and we need to address that. But the Fair Housing Act of 1968, that really touched home with us, because we were there as a part of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. And I'd like to just share that with you. We've been in existence in 1947. Fighting for fair housing and equality. And that was during a time after the Civil War, after the Second Civil War. And 12 people, as you know, 11 men and 1 woman came together from across the country before there was Facebook or texting, and they came together because they were determined to do something about the unfair housing situation in America. The soldiers were coming home from the war. Blacks did not have a home, and they needed to make that happen. So when we look over the years, then we know about the introduction of the VA loans and the FHA loans, but it did not support those Black soldiers. Particularly the VA loan had a 5-year balloon, so it didn't really help a lot of veterans who lost their homes once they purchased because they could not afford to pay that balloon at the end of the 5 years. But 1968, Martin Luther King was there, and the president of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers was there at that table with President Johnson. And we were ecstatic about the Fair Housing Act and changing the narrative about mortgage lending. We were up against a lot of people who did not want to see this happen. So surprisingly, when I seen, I think about what was probably not mentioned, that we had oppositions for so many people, particularly white people, who tried to stop that. They did not want the Fair Housing Bill to be passed. But in 1968, the Black home ownership rate then was about 41%. In 2019, we're seeing the Black housing ownership rate at 41.6%. Where did we go? How far have we moved up? That's the thing that really is upsetting. And when we think about all the things that happened in between that time, including the mortgage crash from 2008 to 2012, Blacks, African Americans were hit the hardest. So I find that was a part that was very devastating. We're still trying to overcome the things that we were at the table for in 1968.
Wow. Thank you. All righty. So, Harris, can you unmute yourself, please, sir?
Okay, yes, I'm unmuted. And there I go. Wow, finally, okay. This was some work. Thank you, guys.
Right. So this is another person, and I'm sorry, guys, and Miss Arlene, I must apologize. She is the Regional Vice President of the National Association Real Estate Brokers Region 3. So this is a young lady I work closely with. She really is helping mold my chapter and my and the way I view real estate. This gentleman, Harris Corbett, is the former regional vice president of the same region, and we spent a lot of years together as well in real estate. How he is a mortgage lender with Freedom Mortgage, and Harris, I know you were able to look at the video.
Yes,
so
I looked at the video.
Okay, so one of my questions to Miss Arlene was have you experienced some of the inequities in lending or in real estate or in life the way that Cory Booker's parents did?
Well, thank you for having this great meeting here in this gathering. It's so needed. And I'm going to tell you, this is a wonderful day because we get a new president. I'm sorry. Thank you guys. This is the best day I had in 4 years. So I just got to say that. Maybe we can get some things done now. I'm aware of it. I'm very knowledgeable of that discrimination. I per se wasn't, in the sense of I grew up in New York City, so everybody had apartments and everybody lived in apartments when I was grade. And it wasn't until actually I got out of the Navy in Philadelphia where I realized that, wow, people have houses and people are owning houses more than these rental apartments. Because in New York, you grow up with this mentality of, just paying rent. You might move over to the condo section, and people start purchasing condos. But when I got out of the Navy in 84, 85, I got out of the Navy. And when I got out of the Navy, I started seeing more folks buying homes and properties of that sort. But I am very much aware of that type of discrimination because, being in the lending business as long as I have, you hear all these different, where it was at one time, it was just commonplace, the whole non-conforming loans and the subprime loans were so commonplace back then. Everybody spoke freely. So you would hear all the mortgage people talking about, well, I made this much money off. I made $10,000 off this $40,000 loan. And it just always bothered me. I said, well, how did you make that much money on that little loan? And when you talk to them a little bit further, when I say they're mortgage folks and they get more insight into it, you see where basically they was taking advantage of our folks here. Our folks were the ones getting taken advantage of. So when they mention, you know, regulations are getting tighter and tighter, we need those regulations because these folks have been taking advantage of us for so many years. And that's from the lending side. There's no way a person should make $10,000 and $15,000 off a $40,000 house. I mean, that's just, you know, that's just wrong. And it's always been wrong for me. I myself being in the business for 21, 22 years, my avenue has always been FHA. If I can't get you to F, I'd rather fight you that way, get you the lowest rate possible, the lowest money possible. I'd rather fight than throw you into a program that basically, you know, that's not going to do you no good. You're going to be able to keep the house. So, I mean, that's a long way of answering Corey's question, but that movie, that video was phenomenal. I'm gonna take to a lot of people. I'm gonna put that out there and I'm gonna push the heck out of that because that was an awesome video. It went from one level to the other, to the different stages. But one thing you notice out of all those stages, we always persevere. We push on. Because even in my business, what I say, even as of today, I was explaining to one of my clients, I said, you know, there's words that we use in this business called normal and customary, you know, and fair. You know, you may have millions of books of underwriting guidelines, but it has to be fair and normal and customary. You know, so those are the things I try to express to the clients out there.
Okay, thank you. So our topic is revolving around economic wealth and decreasing that wealth gap. So one of the things that I know we've all seen in this industry, and at this time still in particular, is, and this again is revolving around real estate, that home appraisals. Is it true or is it a myth that you can actually sell your house if you live in an African-American area? And here's the thing, that term redlining that they use in the video, that's real.
Oh, yeah.
Funny, I was just reading an article a little while ago how, and a lot of the areas that were redlined, or the African-American areas or brown areas or whatever, there's less trees there, there's no parks, there's mostly asphalt. I mean, there's little improvement. And this isn't Tracee, there's cited articles, in 2020 regarding this. But so back to my question, a house, 2-story, 3-bedroom, 1.5, 2.5, whatever bathroom home, single family home in one of those areas that were redlined years ago, or one of those, you know, brown areas. Is it true that that house in another area could have a different value, appraised for a different value?
And who's that question to?
You and Miss Arlene.
Well,
Okay.
let me say that redlining is still alive and well. Modern day redlining is something that we are living with today. And we should realize that and understand what's going on. So in regard to your question about appraisal, we know that there are not enough certified African-American appraisers in our community. And in fact, Freddie Mac was a program to find ways to increase the numbers of Blacks in the appraisal industry. And they said it's the white man's game with his notepad. And he may be coming from a different area when he comes into our neighborhood. So he has no idea what the values are. So they do not always represent the best interests of the people in our community. So we have an issue with appraisals. And that has been a downturn for mortgage approvals, because a potential buyer will make an application and find out, well, now we have an issue because the property didn't appraise and you're not approved for this amount. And certainly they don't have the extra $5,000 or $10,000, and the mortgage lender is not going to approve it if they see that you cannot afford to do this. So we have all of this going against us, and redlining geographically, we see it now with some of the mortgage loans and the government programs that specifically say, well, you will be entitled to a certain down payment and other assistance if you live in this geographical area. Then you qualify for a loan that'll give you a $5,000 down payment or $10,000 down payment. All of that ties into redlining. All of that ties into what type of an appraisal report that one may receive. Now, I'm sure Harris has some other things to add to that from the mortgage end, and this is the way we see it in the real estate industry.
So before Harris goes, as a seller's agent, is there some, what do you recommend to your sellers when you're telling them, when they're going to list their properties? Is there something you could tell them to, so that other than the location, the property isn't, it may or may not have a Black homeowner in it?
Well, we always recommend that the value is priced fairly. Today, you have access to all of these programs online to give you market value, comparative market value, and they're not all accurate. Zillow, they're not accurate. So what we do is try to help them to get a fair and accurate market value of the home. Otherwise, the home is not going to sell, and it's going to sit on the market, and that's definitely going to be.
I'm sorry. Do you recommend they take their pictures down?
No. I'm actually have a listing now. It's a luxury home, and I mean a luxury property or home, if you will, in a predominantly white neighborhood. And I was asked that question. And I think it's a personal choice, because eventually, like Cory Booker, when they got to the table, something happened. Something happened because they were so shocked that this is a Black person. I'd rather you know up front.
Okay.
I've gone to show properties with families in a white neighborhood, and they stopped us at the door and says, no, my agent's not here. We're not comfortable with you showing the home. So we walk away. So I feel better, in my opinion, that you know up front. If we're going to have an issue, we need to have that conversation.
Okay, thank you. What about you, Harris? Is there something, because I know the way the appraisal system is set up, a person, you call a clearinghouse to have an appraiser sent out to the property, but after that, is there something you can do, or what do you see?
Well, I see the
and I'll get to my point in a second.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Well, no, I see like Arlene, I have to agree with her. It is a old boys network. I really think, because we as NAACP, we are foot soldiers, but when we combine ourselves, we are many. Like we're down here on the bottom working directly with the folks, but we also need to have a legislative impact. And I think something really needs to be done on that appraisal issue, because I have friends who went so far as taking the courses and take the exam, but they keep it a closed net, because I guess you need to be with an appraiser, and you need to be an apprentice under one of them for so much time. And I think that's where they get it capped at, where they don't allow you to break that ceiling with the appraiser. So I think there's something that really needs to be done about that. In terms of what I recommend when I deal with appraisal issues from a lending standpoint, can you guys hear me? Because I
Yes.
think you guys look a little. We good?
Yes.
Okay, so what I think of it from a lending standpoint, in my experience in dealing with appraisal issues, you gotta know the game. You know what I mean? You gotta know in terms of, a lot of it has to do, they always come at you with the comps, and these comps, and basically it's pulling different comps. And once again, like I mentioned, reasonable and customary. You can always dispute, because then they have all the adjustments on the appraisals when it comes to so much for a floor, so much for an extra room, so much for a condition, 3,000 here, 5,000 there. You'll see the different adjustments that need to be made with those appraisals. So you can always debate appraisals, but you got to know what you're talking about. You know, you got to be familiar, like Arlene said, you got to be familiar with the area. You got to look at what's appealing, why you think this particular property deserves this value, and you got to have the documentation to back that up. The more documentation you have, the more stronger your fight is.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm hearing is education, once again, like the consumer should educate themselves a little more, and which helps level that playing field and possibly shorten that wealth gap, and also legislation. Okay.
Yes, yes.
So,
yes.
and I'm just gonna cite, there's an article about a Jacksonville couple that had a 40% price jump in their appraisal after they removed all that. Now, we're not in Florida, but after they removed anything that identified who they were. So initially, the house was appraised for like a little over 100,000, and then their second appraisal, and they requested a second appraisal. So that's why I was asking, is there something that a person could do? And guys, I know this seems like it revolves around real estate, but this still, I'm trying to just bring some examples of ways to work whatever your situation is. But their house, their initial appraisal was for $330,000, but after that second appraisal, it was $465,000.
Wow.
So I just wanted to get an idea there. Okay, so now this is going to be another question regarding real estate matters. How can, in your opinion, and Elizabeth, feel free. I mean, I know you are involved.
Because I do have a question.
Okay, good. Thank you. And I know there are people out there on Facebook watching and other attendees. If you have a question, put it in the chat and we'll make sure we get your question answered. Elizabeth, I know you work with credit, so you and Harris, you know. So if you have a comment on anything we're talking about, please jump in and give us your professional opinion as well. Would you like to ask your question now?
I do.
Okay,
No. A statement. So the reason why I thought the film was so relevant is because it provided a lot of history. But I think it's really, really important to know the history, but we have a problem with our mindset. So the question that I wanted to hear from the panelists, the answer is in some ways, how can we reverse this? And the first thing that I keep coming up in all my conversation, even about getting your credit, and it was very alarming to hear that even if you have an 800 credit score, you still will get a subprime loan. So again, that history, that education, and having the best credit possible. And so we could talk about that, later on if it comes up again, but that is very disturbing that 1 out of 4 people of color will still get a subprime loan, even if you have a credit score of 800. That's disturbing.
It is, it really is. And it happens a lot. And, sometimes that's why education is important. And as a professional, real estate professional who services clients, sometimes, you get a little upset when people are all on the internet and they're doing all this work, but for real, that's what they should do. Mm-hmm. I need to encourage them to, do that and realize that we work as a team to get them to their end game. And so I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is true. It happens all the time. And a lot of times, not me anymore, but sometimes I used to be like, oh, good, they're pre-qualified. I wouldn't even think, do they have another option? But I ask my clients up front, what is your score? Especially after they've spoken with their mortgage originator, what's your score? And then I'll call them and say, hey, what programs are available? I mean, is this the best that you can do? Is there anything better that we can do? I literally work hard with that person trying to get my client in the best position as possible. Okay, so I agree with you.
If I can address the question a little one more time as a lender and with the 800 and the subprime, the only way I see, even in this day with that type of a situation scenario on being subprime, is maybe a stated income where a borrower is self-employed. Because you could figure if 800 score, if he's got a regular W2 job, that's that's going to be standard conventional. So the only way that's going to work is in a non-conforming arena, where basically they have to do those different type of aggressive financing things, where the person may not have W2s, but they go on one of those bank statement programs. I'm familiar with them. I have never really. It isn't something I really offer. I'm familiar with it, but it's just something. But I know that I know the guidelines. One of the things about my business is you got to know there's what's called all regs, our regulations and guidelines for Fannie, Freddie, FHA, and you got to know those rules. And then, because once you know those rules, then you know ways to structure your situation based to those rules. I'm not gonna say on this camera that basically you can adjust it, but let's just say you can make the picture conform more to those guidelines and rules that Fannie and Freddie and HUD may want to get involved with.
Okay, all right, thank you. So we have about 20 to 30 more minutes. So there's two major questions I want to ask you guys. How can a person use real estate or other vehicles to create wealth? Do you believe that that's a possibility? I do, but do you believe that? And I know that we both are, okay, thank you. I know that we're all from the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, and yes, part of our mantra is democracy in housing, and we want 2 million new homeowners in 5 years. So I know that that's what we do, but can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, well, an answer to some of the questions about the credit issues and applying it to the mortgage, we have our initiatives at NAARBE, and one of the things we're doing, education. We are the foot soldiers. We are out there trying to educate our people about what they need to do to become homeowners. We're educating them about building wealth in their family and in their community. And we have to constantly do this without stopping, because once we lax, everything else becomes lax. We have to teach them about the history and why things happen. And we got to change the narrative for the millennials, because they don't see any reason to invest in real estate. Right. They watched their parents lose their homes. They went through a terrible time, and we did not even think about how it affected that generation and how it destroyed our history. Because if we go back in our history from the South, we didn't get the 40 acres and a mule, but when they got a piece of land, the land was paid off and it was passed on to the next family member, the next family member. And we've seen that when they came through the great migration from the South to the North, and people were buying homes and they were keeping those homes and passing them on. And what we see now, grandma's house started going down because the family members that inherited wouldn't pay the taxes, or they wouldn't take care of the property. And then we see other people coming into the neighborhood, and gentrification and prime loans and all these other equity loans just infuriate our community, and we start losing our wealth. And this is what we got. We got to change the mindset. That's the first thing we have to do. Right. And if we don't do that, it will not change. So that's an important, that's what we do at NAACP. Like our initiative, housethannacar.com. We're educating people, buy the house first. Because if you don't buy the house, you buy the house first, then the car. Because if you buy the car and you go out there and we said, if you own a Range Rover, you're in violation of our home ownership program. You're in violation. We won't accept that. Because you're going to pay $700-800 a month for a car and you don't have a house. Right. That destroys your ability to build and grow wealth. And they also have to understand, why is it important to own it? Because for myself, when I decided to retire and I'm going to take equity out of to start a business, If I didn't have that equity in my home, I wouldn't have been able to start that business. And that's what a lot of people will do with the equity in their home, and they pay for the children's college education or for that big wedding that someone was looking forward
That's
to.
right. That's
You know,
right.
so that's what we need to understand. That's wealth for us in our community.
Okay. And it's funny, I just want to share my own experience with, you said equity in your home. When I first relocated to the Harrisburg area, I was renting, of course, because I moved here within 3 weeks of my new assignment. And it was time to find our own place. And the guy came to us, Harris, and we had excellent credit, but he wanted to offer us this huge interest rate to buy the house we were living in. And it wasn't where I wanted to be. I'm like, honey, why are we begging this guy to give us a decent interest rate when it's going to be our bill? Like, you have to really think. And a lot of times, because of lack and because our ancestors didn't have, or we couldn't maintain what our ancestors had, we come, or the way we think is a feeling of lack. And it's not, I'm not saying it negatively. I embrace that. Sometimes I have to stop myself before I purchase something. Like, why do I really want this? And I'm like, listen, we have great credit. Why is he trying to charge us? And back then it was, interest rates were around 6%, and he was trying to charge us 10. No. So we didn't buy the house we lived in, and then we were looking for a car at the time. And the people gave us the car for the weekend. And I woke up Sunday morning, I'm like, honey, we're taking this car back. I want a house. I'm not playing. So we bought a house, and we took the equity from our house and bought four or five rental properties. So, and it was, now if I hadn't been thinking, I needed that odyssey. I had those kids. And we look good in that for the weekend.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
But I pulled up in front of a rental property that I was renting, and my landlord lived next door, and his kids were in college. I'm like, oh no. So, but sometimes we just got to give ourselves some time, family, to just think. And I tell my kids this, I tell everybody this, even when my clients are purchasing, I'm like, listen, I know you are pre-approved at $250,000.
That's right.
But what are you paying now? Because if you're only paying $600 a month now, you can't afford 13, 14. You're going to be very uncomfortable. And so, but we get excited because I worked on my credit. I can do whatever. But anyway, so I just wanted to interject that. Harris, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, please. I enjoyed that. Absolutely. If I had to think about it, I would say, don't think, one thing about us, we have a tendency of wanting over and more than where we're at. You know, instead of thinking about that $500,000 single family home, think about that $200,000 home that you can do a renovation for of $50,000 that's worth $500,000. My own personal situation is I always try to buy the best properties, the worst properties in the best neighborhoods. The worst properties, that's my mindset. The worst properties in the best neighborhoods. When I thought about what I'm doing in Delaware, I'm in New York, I'm in Baltimore, I have stuff in South Carolina. It's just because I look for the worst stuff, and every property I've ever done has been a renovation deal. I look at the house, I'm like, oh man, there's a tree in the middle of that house. Goodness gracious. Well, okay, let me see, there's this much work. That gives me more of a negotiating period. You know what I mean? I'm willing to negotiate. Now, you got a lot of people who don't want to go through that work. They want to move in, to move out, but if you're really thinking about real estate as an investment, you want to basically look for those deals. We need reliable, trustworthy contractors. We need contractors as well. That's another line that we are desperately in need of. Because if you're looking for those type of renovation deals, you can't even get a contractor now. They're so busy, You need contractors who are reliable and honest. That's all part of it. Putting putting a good team together, a good contractor, a good plumber, an electrician, meeting these guys, putting together a good quality team like that. I mean, and It doesn't take a lot. You don't have to be a genius to do these. Are just, just meeting the right type of people. But don't have your sights always looking at that biggest, shiniest object. Look at that situation. First, look at the neighborhoods, the areas you want to be at, you know what I mean? The safe areas. That's why this whole gentrification thing, we look at these properties that might be run down, and we look at it one way, that investor's looking at it another way. You know what I mean? They're looking at, well, please, that's just a little paint, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of roof and stuff. Products out there that will allow you to purchase and, as an investor, renovate those properties. So look more towards the renovation of stuff. Don't look at that shiny, big, single family, 4,000 square foot home out there. Look for something that's safe, because I mean, safety is an issue. Look for it safe, but don't have your eyes on the renovation stuff, because that's what it's about. If you want to, have that income that relies further on, that once you get tired of working and selling these houses and being on that road, you have that rental income coming in. They always say that rental income is what it should be. Rental income is always what it should be, because you're not trying to develop renters for a lifetime. You only rent for a couple of months or a year till their situation gets better. But that's what somebody had to talk to me about. I had to say, look for the renovation stuff, because that's where it's at.
I wrote a note, worst property in the best neighborhood.
I did. I wrote the name right. I did too.
I'm putting it on my board.
I've lived by that for years.
Right.
I never even knew that. Okay.
But
go ahead.
But that concept, I've heard it from many, in the 80s from Colton Sheets, in the 90s from Robert Kiyosaki. That is not a new concept. It is new to us, but it's not a new concept. A training that I went to by Fortune Builders, they talk about that all the time. Buy the worst property in the best neighborhood, so you get a good deal. They're just trying to get rid of that eyesore. They don't know the value. They don't care the value. But that, again, what I'm hearing from you guys is a lot of mindset changing, and that's what our people need. But this one thing that I did want to say, and I wrote a question, but it's really a statement. JC talked about that piece of art that he bought for $1 million. Then it's worth 200, then it's worth 2 million, then 3 million. And so that's something that we need to be thinking of. We shouldn't be selling grandma's house like right away. We should be thinking about the next several generations.
Right.
And he said, I can't wait to give this to my children. We are the only, that I'm familiar with, culture that says, my grandma didn't give me, my parents didn't give me anything, and I'm not leaving my kids. Why not have a life insurance policy? Why not have that old house that you can get that equity? Maybe that might be a down payment for a wedding, maybe to help them pay their student loans off. Our children are graduating from college poor because we are not setting them up. And it's pretty simple. That first step, just like Cory Booker said, that first home set his family up for wealth building, right? Yeah. So this conversation is not just about the history, and it's more about changing the mindset, because these kids, they can Google anything. And like Tracee said, they can Google anything. But this is something that we have to say over and over and over. Just like it was said over and over and over. We couldn't have it. We got to keep telling ourselves that we can have it. Mm-hmm. So, but I did want to ask the question. I know you're the moderator, Tracee, but I did want to ask the question from the panel to see what is the first thing we should do as a people to close this racial gap?
Racial wealth gap?
Yes, I'm sorry, what did I say? Just racial wealth gap, yes.
Racial wealth gap.
Yes.
I think the first thing is the ongoing is that we need to educate our community. We need to go into the community, into the churches, into the sororities, fraternities, the Divine Nine, and to all of the groups in our community. And we need to educate them from the youngest to the oldest, because you'd be surprised of the gap within our community with the understanding of wealth, the understanding of investment into real estate. We don't have that knowledge, and we're not sharing that. Even at the dinner table, you need to start talking about Thanksgiving is coming, talk about wealth. One of the things you mentioned about investing, do you know there are so many people I've met that had wealth when children come to, when their children come to this area for college. I had a run of investments around Temple University because the parents are coming by looking for properties. They purchased the property, and that property paid for the child's education. And they put the child up in the property and let them rent out the 4 rooms so they had other income. Once the child leaves school or graduate, you know, then I get a call, we're selling the property. That is how they continue to build their wealth. And if we don't teach these wealth building techniques and talk about them to our people, then we're not going to see how far we can go with, as well as you talked about compounding interest and how we invest our money. You're not getting good interest in a savings account. We know that. And the banks are not offering a very good return. But so we need to start talking, having those conversations and having them there within the family and within the community.
Excellent.
I agree.
My answer to that basically, I think we're at the foothold. I said buy a home to decrease that wealth gap. I believe in real estate. I believe basically first let's start with everybody buying their home, increasing home ownership. That's the first thing, you know, because I think about, you know, you buy that first house and you know, you buy it and you live there. I mean, it can't always be an investment mindset because you got 2 mindsets. You got the folks who buy real estate and they hold on to them, or you got folks who buy real estate and flip them. You know, which side do you want to be on? My avenue is basically, I like to buy properties and keep them, you know, because I just feel that real estate is wealth. Real estate is wealth. The more properties you own, and not all properties are good, because then, I mean, you got to be careful about certain things. You know, you got to do your homework. I say basically study, read. I try to tell my clients all the time, I want you to know as much as I do. You know, at least know as much as possible. I give them my website. There's stuff on my website for first-time home buyers. I want you to take that first-time home buyer education course. I want you to meet with that credit counselor. I want you to meet with, and I want you to have the information so you know what you're getting into. You know, because that's education. That's what it's going to be about. You know, so know what you're getting into. That way, you can't be, because when I think about those times in the 80s when it was all this subprime. They only did that to folks who wouldn't read, because we wouldn't read all the paperwork.
Harris. He's frozen.
Form. Those are what I want you to do. And to increase that wealth gap, buy a house. Let's start from scratch. If you have credit issues, let's work with those credit counselors. Let's get them, you know, and that's going to be so pivotal. I think for these years to come up, to decrease that wealth gap, the credit experts are going to be the most important piece of that.
Wow.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is another question, and just hear me out.
Okay.
Gentrification. Okay. We know about all the negative, right, about gentrification. And I agree with it. My grandmother said, learn the game and be better than them. Okay. Our ancestors fed the master. They killed the pig, fed the master, but raised families on the chitlins, scraps, right? They raised families on, and look at us. Ha! Ain't nothing wrong with me. Okay. So when I look at gentrification, yes, they come into our neighborhoods and they do whatever. How can we reverse that. I'm not saying that, I'm saying, yes, we should get involved in development and assist in developing, but what else can we do?
Well, I look at this like, when you think about gentrification, what determines the value of a property? And that is the residents, the income level of the residents that's moving into that neighborhood. That's what increases values of properties. Well, that's what determines whether a property is going to be this value in this area, that value in that area. It's the residents to a point, the income level of the residents. That's what their mindset is. Because if you know their mindset, they being, you know, the folks on top, you know, if you know that their mindset is, okay, what determines values, a certain income level, and what determines those income levels? Well, basically that's where that, and I say again, what determines, let's go with renovations, because what happens is a lot of times the house may be run down or something, or needs some work, and we're ready to sell and move on. We should fix that house. We need to keep our properties. That's where, you know, that's the difference between people who flip, they buy, they rehab, they flip. You know, that's the difference between that and a person who buys a property, keeps it, and maintains that property throughout the time. And that's where the general income comes, because you could get that one lump check for flipping it, or you can get the steady stream of income. You know, that's what, and it's not that you're trying to develop a world of renters, you know, that's not what you're trying to do. But you're trying, you know, you rent with the mindset of, you know, it being a temporary thing for that borrower. Because the folks who rent my properties, I try to tell them, say, listen, well, when are you gonna start buying your own house? You know what I mean? Let me see what your credit looks like. Because I be trying to help them be customers, and you can buy a house. You don't have to rent from me. You know, you're a good tenant, but I'd rather see you more self-sufficient. And if you're in a situation where you can buy a house, I'd rather see you buy a house. So okay. That's, you know, if that answers your question.
That's yes, that's part of it.
Well, for me, gentrification is a sore spot. There is the thought that improving your community in your city is a good thing and something that we're going to have to be facing. We're going to see changes. Changes are going to come. But I know that gentrification is a result of systemic racism and redlining. That the funds to rehab or to renovate the homes that people live in was not awarded to them. And Tracee, you mentioned about a number of things that I have talked to people about and giving the testimony on this matter in Philadelphia. And there was an article about a gentleman came in from California to Philadelphia, found out why did we have the highest rate of low home ownership in our community and what was going on, why redlining and discrimination here. So I answered the questions and I looked at some of the situations, and I seen where a woman was trying to get a loan to renovate her house. She wanted a new kitchen. She had lived in the home for about 30 years in South Philadelphia. Well, around her was the development of homes at 400 to 700,000. She was not willing to move. She wanted to stay in her house with her little dog and just renovate. And she was denied a loan from a bank within the community. She had good credit score. She had good job. You know, she had good income. She was denied. And that's what infuriates me, because these people, as she said, what can she do? Eventually the house is going to continue to deteriorate until she can get the loan. And they're waiting for, I think that the investors, they're waiting for that. I've seen churches, people have been pushed out of their churches in Philadelphia, in these areas, because they could not get the loan. Or when the building started, people saying, well, we can't find a place to park, and they're not giving us access to these things. We are being pushed out of the neighborhoods. That's what's happening. We're being pushed out of the neighborhoods where we have created wealth, and someone else comes in to take that over. Now, I have serviced people in the area, and I have friends that says, we know, in fact, one of my last clients in that area, the women were in their 90s. I thought they were so sweet because they were advocates and they were strong. One said, I'm a block captain. My parents bought this house probably in the early 19th centuries. It's 3-story and it's you know, she couldn't live there alone. And there was a lot of work to be done, a lot of work. And it was on St. Albans Street, which is a block where a movie had been filmed, Sixth Sense. I sold that house almost like a shell for over $500,000. That's because I'm not gonna let my people being taken advantage of.
That's right.
Our people will pick up the phone and someone says to you, let me buy your home. They send out postcards. There is a mural or display, it was in the Philadelphia Art Museum, where one woman just took offense to this and she posted a wall with all the postcards of investors asking people to buy their home. This has got to stop. And if we don't educate our people, you're leaving money on the table. You're leaving money on the table.
Okay.
So I'm not very comfortable with that, but I think we have to do everything to make sure we get our worth out of any property. If you have to sell, you have to move on, but make sure you get the value and don't let people take you for granted.
Okay, good. And that's kind of both what you both said is kind of what I wanted to, because it's coming. And what can we do to prevent it? Or what can we do to be a part, not really a part of, I guess it would be a part of. Because when they come, they have these community meetings. They post them in the newspaper, or online, but if you're not reading the paper to get the notice, you don't know that. So if we can show up to the community meetings, we'd at least know something that we're going to do. I'm thinking if we could get on some of those job sites to have income brought into our houses, you know, instead of having to sell our house, but if we can create more income for our family, then we can build up our house or potentially fight them from trying to take our property. And you're like what you said, Miss Arlene and Harris, if we could sell our property for maximum amount of money, because it was part of her parents' legacy. And so you're right, I'm not gonna give away my mother's legacy because you wanna put in a $40 million property, but you wanna give me $40,000, no. So I applaud you for that. And then Harris, you were saying maintain your property, you know.
And also, one of the things I want to just comment on, based on that type of scenario too, this is where NAACP can be so instrumental, because we know the rules, we know the guidelines, we know the dog a little bit deeper, like, okay, why are they denying this person? And this is where I come back again, fair and customary. Is it fair? Because if it's not fair, then what we can do is we have the connections in terms of legislatively. One thing about folks who got the money, they don't want the publicity. They don't want to be known as taking somebody's house. They don't want it out there. They don't want all that bad publicity. So that scares the heck out of them. So with NAACP and the connections they had, because I remember a couple of scenarios where I wasn't feeling right. I thought it was some racial overtone issues going on. So next thing I know, I just made a couple of calls. I made a call to, I think, a director at Fannie Mae, who put me on to somebody else, who put me on some legislative person. Next thing you know, I got calls of, please, we're gonna take care of this. You know what I mean? So one thing about what our organization do, even though we're on the ground, we have the resources to take it to the next level. And that's what we have to do, be willing to, and when it comes to saving that person you was referring to, saving her property, that's what we are, that's part of what we do. You know what I mean? We gotta help with our knowledge.
So,
Okay. Thank you.
okay.
You want to say something?
Yeah, so, you know, in reference to gentrification, that it will be helpful to us, not just education, that we're more prepared, and not just credit. A lot of times we are denied for those type loans, but when are we going to start trusting each other and making better decisions? That why can't 10 of us, now they'll give us a loan for a certain amount. Why can't 10 of us get together and buy that apartment building? And why can't we hire that black plumber that Black roofer, that Black landscape. Because in my home, everything that I have done in my home is done by a brother or sister of color. And that's being intentional. So we could cut into that a little bit by being a part of those committees. And so that means we need to come out of our own circles, and we need somebody on the zoning board. We need somebody on the land trust. We need somebody, you know, like organization, like we need all of those strategic, watching the mayor's office and watching this and that, everything that has to do with economics and community development and community growth. We need to strategically put our people on these boards, because these they say we notified the community. I'm like, well, how come I didn't see it? You know, so maybe because it wasn't on Facebook is what we usually looking at. Maybe it's a newspaper, and who reads a newspaper? But they have taken care of their responsibility, and they have put it out there, and they advertise it the way the statute or law or whatever, or the community legislation said we have to advertise what's going on. But we are not in tune. We're in our own world. But we start helping one another, we start thinking that I'll do this for you, and we can do this, and you can take my education, and I can help you with that. So there's so much that we all have to offer. And when that trust starts to happen, we'll start rebuilding that Black Wall Street. And we may not need to worry about that gentrification that's going on downtown. Maybe we don't want that no more, because guess what? Guess whose monies help keep those Starbucks going? Guess who monies to keep those subways going? It's our money. So we need to start thinking a little bit different. Let's just take our money and make different decisions.
Train those young people, that's where it's going to be at. Because, you know, us, well, me, maybe Arlene, I'm not sure. But, you know, we kind of trying to go back. We're trying to get ready to relax these days. You know, we kind of like want to give the information and pass it on at this point to the young people who got that energy, who can be up 16, 17 hours a day and push, because that's what we want. Like my daughter, you know, me being raised, I was raised in a 1-bedroom apartment in New York City. You know what I mean? When we pass, I mean, she's gonna have DC, Baltimore, probably New York, or probably you know, she's gonna have about 8 or 9 different things all over, you know? That's because we gotta do this for these young people, like you mentioned earlier, you know, when you said basically, you know, the mindset. I remember being around certain people, they would say, like you said, I'm not gonna do nothing. They gotta do it for themselves because, you know, I ain't know nobody did it for me. I thought that was kind of selfish, you know, because I look at it like, wow, that they just because they weren't able to do that for you. We're in a different generation. Every generation steps up a little bit, you know. So we have more than what our
Okay, thanks. And I want to thank you guys. And the 2 things I was thinking of was advocacy, well, 3. Advocacy, relationships, and I can't remember the statistics, but I know that in our community, $1 lasts a very long time. It circulates a very short amount of time, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
6 hours.
6 hours in our community.
6 hours for Black people, for people of color. Yes, for Black people.
So I 100% agree, and you know, agree with everything everyone has said. And yes, I agree, and that's why I brought up that gentrification, that we need to have these relationships. You said, why can't 10 people get together? Or I need to know who's on the zoning board. At least one person. One person advocating that I can go in, and I'm telling y'all, I walk into our mayor's in our little center down there where the mayor is. I might go in for zoning, but I'm stopping in some other offices and say, hey,
hi. That's right. That's right.
Just do it. I can't help myself. I try.
That's
I try
right.
to myself. It doesn't feel right to walk in and out.
Right.
Doesn't.
That's
You
right.
know, and so it's about building relationships
That's
and
true.
being cognizant of building those, intentional on building those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times fear and false pride prevents us from doing that.
Yes.
Sure.
See, sometimes I might feel like I'm not going to ask her because I don't want her to know I don't know. No, I'm asking you for what I want.
Right.
And this just happened to me about 4 months ago. My key person in this one department, the economic development department, moved to the state, from the county to the state. So the new person, I went to see him quite a few times. And I said, put me on your mailing list. Next time I saw him, give me your card. Then I emailed him and said, make sure I'm on your mailing list. I get things from him all the time. The guy at the state, he has a new job, but you know who's texting them? Emailing them? Hey, what's going on with the state?
Yes.
We have to maintain those relationships.
Right.
We have to. So when we talk about bridging that wealth gap, these are some of the things: education, legislation, relationships, advocacy, being cognizant of how I spend my money. Everything in your house is done by a person of color. That's being cognizant of where my money is going.
Correct.
So those are the things. And even for me, and sometimes I have to, and I know I'm not the only person of color like this, put my ego aside. I have to, and go get what I need. I have to. And sometimes you have to build relationships with people who don't look like us.
Oh, absolutely.
Better, so those are some of the things that I think about. But we are winding down. Our time is almost up. I want to thank my mentors, Harris Corbett and Arlene Williams Thomas, for showing up for me.
We feed off one another. Thank you for your energy.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And I want to thank Elizabeth for inviting me. Actually, y'all, I got to tell the truth. She called me up and she said, she basically told me I needed to moderate this for her. I'm like, me? Yeah. And I haven't spoken with her for about 2 months.
Right.
Right. So we did it. And so I want to thank you for pushing me outside my comfort zone, because that's something I need to do.
That's what God do.
And then I want to ask, Mr. Blanding isn't on there. What's his last name?
Watson.
Mr. Watson isn't on anymore, but
I don't think so.
I want to schedule a meeting with him. I want us to get together. I want our organizations to get together, and maybe we can do something in Lancaster together and in Dauphin County. But certainly I want to sit down and pick his brain, because relationships are important, and a lot of these issues that we were talking about could be resolved if people could come to NAACP and the NAACP and say, hey, this is the situation. How can y'all help us?
Right.
Okay.
Excellent.
Right.
So I want to echo what Tracee just said. Thank you. You guys were fabulous. I appreciate it. This is a very, very timely topic. Yeah. And I hadn't had my television on for 4 hours on purpose, because I have no more nails. I can't bite any more nails. I'm about ready to bite my grandson's nails. They're so low. But hopefully we have a new president, and our work is just begun.
Yes.
Our work has just begun. And so just because we have a new president don't mean that we're going to solve all our problems. It's going to get uglier before it gets better. And I do believe a lot of this discrimination, and to me, I think a lot of it centers around economic freedom. And that's why I thought this was a great topic. It leads into our topic tomorrow. We're going to have a gentleman he's from Florida. He's going to talk about how money works. You guys talked about that today, and that was very good. So, because we don't often know how money works. So we think that we need to take our little monies and put it in the bank. No, the bankers are using our money. We should be using our money. So we need to understand how money works. So I thank you and I appreciate you. And Tracee will talk some more about collaboration. And so God bless you all.
Thank you.
And consider joining us tomorrow from 10 to 12, where Andre will talk about how money works. So thank you.
I'm getting ready to go over to the waterfront where I hope that Biden's making his announcement. I can go down there, down in Wilmington.
Yes.
Delaware.
Yes, you can't even fly around here anymore.
No. And you know what? I'll have the TV on and I'll be looking for you. So say hi to yes. Exactly.
Exciting.
Exactly.
He was in our community and in Philadelphia with with the Senator Dwight Evans in Philadelphia on election night. So we were very excited about that. So,
very good. So we did that, and we should be, if we can get together and do this, we can do anything. And but again, we really do need, you don't have a voice when you don't have money. And I'm sorry, we can talk and we can definitely advocate, but you need to have a little change in your pocket, because they listen to you if you have something to take away from them, your support. So that is what I am praying for, that we will educate our people and become economic, because it's been done before. It's not like it's never been done before. Black Wall Street is not that far ago, not that long ago. And if they did it with a lot less, we can do it with all the technology and all the information that we have to us. So anyway, guys, it's time to sign off.
Tomorrow, or I'll be on that. I'll be on tomorrow.
Yes,
10 o'clock.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. And thank you.
Okay.
Again.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Have a
Good
good
night.
one. Night.
Good night.